"Let her go, Frank." I lunged forward, but Derek's arm locked around my waist like a vice. My daughter Sarah thrashed in the icy water 15 feet below the dock, her winter coat dragging her down. The December water was black and merciless. "Mom!" Her scream cut through the air before her head disappeared under the surface. "Sarah!" I clawed at Derek's arm, my nails drawing blood. He didn't flinch. Frank stood at the edge of the dock, hands in his pockets, watching his son hold me back. "Should have signed those papers when we asked nicely, Maggie." I twisted, trying to break free, but Derek was younger and stronger. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah surfaced again, gasping, her lips already turning blue. The water temperature was maybe 45 degrees. I knew from my years teaching science that she had minutes, not hours. "Derek, please, she's your wife." My voice cracked. "Ex-wife," he corrected, tightening his grip. "Soon as the paperwork goes through, assuming she's around to sign it." That's when I understood. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a push during an argument. They had planned this. The family weekend at Frank's lake house. The insistence that Sarah come despite their separation. The life insurance policy Derek had taken out 6 months ago, the one Sarah mentioned during our last phone call, the one that made her uneasy. $500,000. With Derek as the beneficiary. They hadn't updated it after the separation filing. A fishing boat appeared around the bend, maybe 200 yards out. I screamed, "Help! Someone help!" Derek's hand clamped over my mouth. "Shut up, Mom. Just a tragic accident." Slipped on the icy dock. "You tried to save her but couldn't swim in this cold." The old, grieving mother-in-law. So sad. But the fisherman had seen us. I watched him grab his phone, then his boat changed direction, heading toward us at full speed. Frank swore. "She's going under. Let the old woman go." Derek released me and I stumbled forward, nearly falling into the water myself. But by the time I reached the edge, Sarah had gone under again and wasn't coming back up. The water was dark, churning slightly in the wind. I couldn't see her. My body moved on instinct. I started to jump, but Frank grabbed my shoulder. "Don't be stupid. You're 62 years old and you haven't swum in years. That water will stop your heart in 90 seconds. He was right, and I hated him for it. I hated myself more. The fisherman's boat was close now, 50 yards. He was already diving in, a young man in a wetsuit. Thank God, thank God. Derek and Frank were backing away from the dock, heading toward the house. "Remember, Maggie," Frank called over his shoulder, "you invited us all here for a nice family reconciliation weekend. Such a tragedy what happened. We'll tell the police how devastated we are." I knelt at the edge of the dock, my hands shaking, watching the fisherman dive again and again. On his 4th dive, he surfaced with Sarah's limp body. He swam toward the dock, one arm hooked under her shoulders. I heard sirens in the distance. The fisherman must have called 911 before diving in. I helped pull Sarah onto the dock, her skin gray, her lips purple. I tilted her head back, started CPR like I'd learned in the mandatory teacher training 20 years ago, praying I remembered it right, praying it would be enough. "Come on, baby, come on." 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Water gushed from her mouth. She coughed, gasped, her eyes flying open in panic. It's okay, I've got you." I rolled her on her side as she vomited lake water onto the wooden dock. The fisherman climbed up beside us, breathing hard. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out. I'm Alex. I saw the whole thing from my boat." He looked toward the house where Derek and Frank had disappeared. "Those men pushed her." "Yes." I pulled off my coat and wrapped it around Sarah's shaking body. They did. The ambulance arrived with 2 police cars. The EMTs took over, loading Sarah onto a stretcher, wrapping her in thermal blankets, checking her vitals. One of them turned to me. "Ma'am, you need to come get checked too. You're in shock." "I'm fine. I'm going with my daughter." "Ma'am?" I said I'm going with my daughter. Officer Henderson, a woman about 40 with kind eyes, nodded. "Let her go. I'll need her statement later anyway." She turned to Alex, the fisherman. "Sir, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw." As they loaded Sarah into the ambulance, I caught Alex's eye. He nodded once, understanding passing between us. He would tell them everything. I climbed into the ambulance, holding Sarah's hand as they closed the doors. Her eyes found mine, filled with tears and terror. Mom, Derek and Frank, I know, honey, I know. Don't talk, just breathe. But inside, I was already making calculations. Alex had witnessed it. That was good. But witness testimony could be challenged, especially when the witnesses were the victim's family members. Derek and Frank would claim Sarah slipped, that I was confused, that the fisherman was too far away to see clearly. Frank owned half the businesses in this county. He had money for good lawyers. They would walk away from this if I didn't act fast. The EMT monitored Sarah's vitals, calling ahead to the hospital. Hypothermia patient. Core temp probably around 92 degrees. Water aspiration. Possible head injury from the fall. Fall. Even the EMT was calling it a fall. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, scrolled through my contacts to a number I hadn't called in 6 months, a number I'd sworn never to use unless it was life or death. My brother James answered on the first ring. Maggie? They tried to kill Sarah. My voice was steady now, cold as the lake water. Derek and Frank, they pushed her off the dock. They held me back while she drowned. There's a witness, but I need you to make sure they don't walk away from this. Silence on the other end. Then, where are you? Ambulance, heading to St. Mary's Hospital in Watertown. Sarah's alive, but I'm 4 hours away. I'll be there in 3. Don't talk to anyone except the doctors and Officer Henderson. I know her. She's good. Don't let Derek or Frank anywhere near Sarah. If they show up at the hospital, you call security and you call me. James. Maggie. Listen to me carefully. This is attempted murder. We're going to make sure they pay for it. But you need to do exactly what I tell you. Do you understand? I looked at Sarah, at her chest rising and falling with each labored breath, at the bruises already forming on her pale skin. Yes, I understand. Good, I'm leaving now. Don't do anything until I get there. He hung up. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and took Sarah's hand again. The EMT glanced at me. Your daughter's going to be okay, ma'am. Her vitals are stabilizing. I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about her vitals. I was thinking about James. About the 30 years he'd spent with the FBI, specializing in cases that local police couldn't crack. About his network of contacts in every law enforcement agency in the state. About the way he'd looked at Derek during Sarah's wedding 3 years ago and whispered to me, "That man's hiding something. Maggie, watch him." I should have listened then. I should have trusted my brother's instincts, but I would trust them now. The hospital was chaos when we arrived. Nurses, doctors, questions shouted over the sound of machines beeping. They took Sarah away, leaving me in a small waiting room with a cup of terrible coffee and a clipboard full of forms. I filled them out mechanically, my hand still shaking. Officer Henderson found me there an hour later. "Mrs. Morrison? I need to ask you some questions about what happened today." I told her everything. She took notes, her expression neutral but her eyes hardening when I described Derek holding me back, Frank watching Sarah drown. "And you're certain they were preventing you from helping your daughter? This wasn't just panic? Confusion?" Officer Henderson, my son-in-law, held me in a restraint grip while my daughter drowned 15 feet away. His father stood at the edge of the dock with his hands in his pockets and told me I should have signed those papers. This was deliberate. She nodded slowly. "Alex Brenner, the fisherman, corroborates your account. He says he saw 2 men on the dock, one holding you back while a woman struggled in the water. He also says one of the men walked away toward the house before he arrived. That was Frank. Derek stayed until the ambulance came, playing the devastated husband. Speaking of which," Henderson glanced toward the emergency room entrance. "Derek Morrison is here. Says he wants to see his wife. Separated wife. And absolutely not. Ma'am, legally. He just attempted to murder her. You will not let that man near my daughter." Henderson studied me for a long moment. "I'll station an officer outside her room for her protection and to ensure the integrity of any evidence. Her clothes, her statement when she's able to give one. But Mrs. Morrison, you should know Derek and Frank Morrison have already contacted their attorney. This is going to get complicated. My brother is on his way. James McAllister. He's..." Henderson's eyes widened. "The FBI agent? That's your brother?" "Retired FBI. But yes." Her whole demeanor changed. She sat down next to me, lowering her voice. Mrs. Morrison, if even half of what you're telling me is true, this is way beyond what my department usually handles. I'm going to call the state police, get their major crimes unit involved, but I need you to walk me through this one more time, every detail you can remember. So I did. I told her about the life insurance policy, about Derek's insistence that Sarah come to the lake house despite their separation, about the prenuptial agreement Sarah had refused to sign, the one that would have given Derek nothing in the divorce, about Frank's business troubles, the lawsuits, the debts, the rumors that he was on the verge of bankruptcy. Henderson wrote it all down. When I finished, she looked at me with something like respect. You're a hell of a lot calmer than most people would be right now. I taught high school chemistry for 35 years, Officer Henderson. You learned to keep your head in a crisis. She smiled grimly. I'll bet you did. Stay here. I'm going to make some calls. She left, and I was alone again with my coffee and my thoughts. I thought about Sarah as a little girl, fearless and bright. About the way Derek had charmed us all when they first started dating the perfect gentleman, the successful young businessman following in his father's footsteps. I thought about the first time I'd seen the mask slip, 2 years into their marriage, a comment Derek made about Sarah's weight at a family dinner, the way he'd controlled the conversation, the way he'd cut her off when she tried to speak. Small things, red flags I'd dismissed. And then 6 months ago, Sarah had called me crying. She wanted a divorce. Derek had become controlling, verbally abusive. She'd found evidence he was hiding money, preparing for the divorce by draining their joint accounts. She'd confronted him, and he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. She'd filed for separation the next week. Derek had been furious. And Frank had been worse. He'd called me directly, threatened to ruin Sarah's career if she made trouble for his son. I'd told him to go to hell and hung up. That's when I should have called James. But I didn't want to worry him. He'd already done so much for us over the years, stepping in when Sarah's father died, walking her down the aisle at her wedding. I wanted to handle this ourselves. Pride, stupid pride. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Morrison? Your daughter is asking for you. I followed him through the maze of hospital corridors to a private room where Sarah lay propped up on pillows, oxygen tubes in her nose, IV lines in both arms. Her color was better pink instead of gray, but her eyes were haunted. Mom. She reached for my hand. They tried to kill me. I know, baby. Frank called me 2 days ago. Said if I didn't drop the divorce and sign over my half of the investment properties, they'd make me regret it. I thought he meant legally. Her voice broke. I didn't think they'd actually. Shh, you're safe now. Am I? She looked at me with fear I'd never seen before. Derek's rich. Mom. His dad's connected. They'll get away with this. They'll say it was an accident and they won't get away with anything. Uncle James is on his way. Sarah's eyes widened. You called Uncle James? I called Uncle James. She started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. I held her carefully, mindful of the IV lines, and let her cry it out. A nurse peeked in, concerned, but I waved her away. Sarah needed this. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back and looked at me. Tell me everything that happened after I went under. I remember hitting the water, hitting my head on something, and then nothing until I woke up coughing. I told her about Alex, about the CPR, about calling James. I didn't tell her about Derek holding me back, about watching her disappear under the water while I was powerless to help. Some things a mother doesn't share with her daughter, but she knew anyway. He held you back, didn't he? Derek. Yes. And Frank just watched. Yes. She closed her eyes. I married a monster. You married a man who turned into a monster. That's not your fault. I should have seen it sooner. You warned me, didn't you? At the engagement party, you pulled me aside and asked if I was sure. I had. I'd seen something in Derek's eyes that night, something calculating. But Sarah had been so happy, so in love. I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. We both missed signs, I said. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is making sure they face justice. A knock on the door. Officer Henderson entered with another detective, a man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. Mrs. Morrison. Miss Morrison, this is Detective Ramirez from the State Police Major Crimes Unit. He's going to be taking over this investigation. Ramirez pulled up a chair. Miss Morrison, I know you've been through hell today, but I need to get your statement while events are still fresh. Can you walk me through everything that happened? Sarah did, her voice shaking but clear. She told him about Frank's threatening phone call, about arriving at the lake house yesterday and feeling uneasy, about Derek being overly friendly, offering to talk things through over a walk on the dock this morning. He kept saying we should try couples counseling one more time, that the separation was a mistake. I kept saying no, I wanted the divorce to proceed, and then she swallowed hard. We were at the end of the dock. Frank came out of the house. Derek grabbed my arms from behind. I thought he was trying to hug me, to manipulate me, but then Frank said, "Should have signed, sweetheart," and Derek just pushed. Did you see your mother-in-law during this? I saw her run out of the house when I screamed. I saw Derek's arm around her. And then I hit the water and everything went dark. Ramirez made notes. The witness, Alex Brenner, says he saw you struggling in the water for approximately 2 minutes before you went under. That's a long time. If this was just someone slipping accidentally, someone would have jumped in immediately. Unless they wanted me to drown, Sarah said quietly. Unless they wanted you to drown, Ramirez agreed. He stood. Ladies, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is a strong case, but it's not open and shut. Derek and Frank Morrison are claiming this was a tragic accident. They say Miss Morrison slipped on the icy dock. They tried to grab her. Mrs. Morrison panicked. They're painting themselves as the victims here. That's bullshit, I said. I agree, but I need more than witness testimony. I need physical evidence. He paused. The good news is, we're getting it. The dock where this happened? Security cameras on the house captured the whole thing. Frank Morrison apparently forgot he'd installed them last summer after a break-in. Sarah and I stared at him. You have video? I asked. We have video, and it shows exactly what you described, Derek restraining you, Frank watching, Miss Morrison struggling in the water. It's damning. Ramirez smiled grimly. We're bringing them both in for questioning within the hour. By tonight, they'll be under arrest for attempted murder. I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been clenched tight since the moment Sarah hit the water. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet. Thank that fisherman for being a witness, and thank Frank Morrison for being arrogant enough to think he'd get away with this. Ramirez headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Mrs. Morrison? Your brother called me 20 minutes ago, gave me some very helpful background on the Morrison family's financial situation. Turns out Frank's been embezzling from his own company, and Derek knew about it. They were desperate for money. $500,000 in life insurance would have solved a lot of problems. After he left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a long moment. It's really over? She asked finally. The attempt on your life is over. The legal battle is just beginning. But yes, honey, you're safe now. She squeezed my hand. Thank you for calling Uncle James. Thank you for staying alive long enough for that fisherman to pull you out. She smiled weakly. Not really my choice, but I'll take the credit. The door opened again. This time, it was James. My brother looked older than when I'd seen him last, more gray in his hair, new lines around his eyes. But his presence filled the room the same way it always had, solid, commanding, safe. Sarah. He crossed to the bed and kissed her forehead. You scared the hell out of me, kid. Sorry, Uncle James. He turned to me. Maggie, you did good. Calling me, getting the police involved immediately, making sure there were witnesses. He pulled up a chair between us. Now here's what's going to happen. Detective Ramirez is going to arrest Derek and Frank within the hour. They'll be charged with attempted murder, possibly conspiracy to commit murder, depending on how much premeditation he can prove. They'll make bail. Frank's got money, but there will be conditions. Restraining orders. No contact with either of you. What about the trial? Sarah asked. Months away. But I've already talked to the DA's office. With the security video, with Alex Brenner's testimony, with the evidence of motive, the life insurance, the pending divorce, Frank's financial troubles, this is as solid a case as they come. They're both looking at 20 years minimum. 20 years. Derek would be in his 50s when he got out. Frank would be nearly 90. It should have felt like victory. But all I felt was tired. James seemed to read my mind. He reached over and took my hand. "You saved her life today, Maggie. You kept your head, you called for help, you did CPR, you did everything right. I couldn't jump in after her. I was too old, too weak. You were smart. If you'd jumped in that water at your age, you both would have died. You made the right call." Derek held me back. "Frank, I know. Ramirez told me everything." His jaw tightened. "Those bastards are going to pay for what they did. I promise you that." Sarah started crying again, and James moved to comfort her. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. In the distance, I could see police cars pulling up to the hospital entrance. Through the glass, I watched as officers led Derek and Frank out in handcuffs. Derek was shouting something, gesturing wildly. Frank walked with his head down, already calculating his defense. I watched until they disappeared into the police cars. Watched until the cars drove away. "Mom?" Sarah's voice, small and scared. "Is it really over?" I turned back to her, to my daughter who was alive and safe and going to be okay. "Yes, baby, it's really over." But I was wrong. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The trial was 8 months later, on a hot August day. I sat in the front row of the courtroom with James on one side and Sarah on the other, watching as the jury filed in. The evidence had been overwhelming. Security footage showing Derek pushing Sarah off the dock. Alex Brenner's testimony about witnessing the whole thing. The financial records showing Frank's embezzlement and Derek's knowledge of it. The life insurance policy. The threatening phone call Frank had made to Sarah, which she'd recorded on her lawyer's advice. The defense had tried everything, claiming the push was an accident, that Derek had been trying to grab Sarah as she slipped, that the security footage was unclear. They'd tried to paint Sarah as a vindictive ex-wife making false accusations. But the jury hadn't bought it. I could see it in their faces. The forewoman stood. "In the case of the state versus Derek Morrison, we find the defendant guilty of attempted murder in the first degree." Sarah's hand found mine, squeezed tight. "In the case of the state versus Frank Morrison, we find the defendant guilty of attempted murder in the first degree and conspiracy to commit murder." Derek's face went white. Frank just stared straight ahead, expressionless. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, 25 years for Derek, 30 for Frank. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, shouting questions. James steered us through them, his hand on Sarah's back, protective. We'd already agreed not to give any statements. There was nothing left to say. In the parking lot, Sarah stopped and turned to look back at the courthouse. "You okay?" I asked. "I was just thinking, if Alex hadn't been fishing that morning, if you hadn't called Uncle James, if Frank hadn't installed those cameras." She shook her head. "So many things had to go right." "They did go right. That's what matters." "I know. It's just..." She looked at me, and I saw the girl she used to be, before Derek, before the fear. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." "That's what mothers do, honey." James cleared his throat. "Ladies, I hate to break up this hallmark moment, but there's a celebration dinner waiting for us at Emilio's, and I'm buying." We drove to the restaurant together, the three of us, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt like I could breathe again. Sarah was safe. Derek and Frank were going to prison. Justice had been served. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when Sarah got married 3 years ago, standing at the altar in her white dress, promising to love and honor a man who would one day try to kill her for insurance money. But it was an ending, and sometimes that's enough. That night, after dinner, after Sarah had gone home to her new apartment and James had driven back to his place upstate, I sat alone on my porch with a glass of wine and thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago. The woman who'd stood on that dock, helpless, watching her daughter drown. The woman who'd made the hardest decision of her life not to jump in, but to call for help. The woman who'd trusted her brother to make things right. I wasn't that same woman anymore. I'd learned things about myself I never wanted to know. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought. That I could keep my head in a crisis. That I could watch evil and not break. But I'd also learned that family isn't always blood. That sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who try to destroy you. And that justice, real justice, requires more than just being right. It requires witnesses, evidence, courage. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Love you, Mom. Thank you for saving my life." I smiled and typed back, "Love you too, baby. Sleep well." Then I sat back and watched the stars come out, one by one, until the sky was full of light. This concludes the story of Margaret Morrison. See you in the next life story.